Welcome back, guys. Today we have lesson 4. We are talking about American novel genres. As you can see, we have some key genre, another example of American novels. But first, I want to go here and I want to talk about American literature. This is an overview. So start with a question: what is American literature? So we know refer from United States literature, and of course, written in English. And it's important to know that some objects the term American literature to refer to English language literature in the United States because the term erases literature from elsewhere in the Americas that is written in Spanish, Portuguese, French, or other languages. So we already know that. History starts here. Many of following facts illustrate the relationship. For example, in 1472 to 1775, we have the Puritan and colonial literature. Right. I know most of you actually know this topic because there is a subject that speak about this topic. But it's important to know this and of course repeat again because it's essential for our subject too. Well, before reading this, because it's kind of long, I would like to show you some videos speaking about this.
American literature is an especially interesting and exciting branch of our worldwide literary heritage. In the 21st century, the United States of America is the dominant power politically, culturally, and militarily. And that fact alone explains some of today's interest in American literature. People try to account for America and better understand America by studying its literature. Nevertheless, as successful as the American experiment has been, most people, even college-educated people, have a shallow and superficial knowledge of the American literary patrimony. America's widespread ignorance of its past feeds popular misunderstanding. In this American literature course, we will confront some of the popular myths and misconceptions about Americans and their literature. Consider a few commonplace ideas about America. Many people believe that the American settlers introduced slavery to the New World. Another popular belief is that America was largely uninhabited and presented vast empty spaces and plentiful untouched resources ready for the picking by 17th century European settlers. Another often repeated view is that American Indians in pre-Columbian times were living harmoniously, in peace with each other and at one with nature. This concept of the American Indians' veneration of nature was clearly depicted in a long-running public service media campaign launched in 1971, depicting a man in Indian dress crying over litter. More recently, many people in the 21st century, following anti-colonialist theory, see European settlers as capitalists and colonizers who came to America on a mission to expand European influence. Were America's founding fathers, such as George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin, supporters of slavery and morally ambivalent about its continuation in America? This is a wildly popular thesis in 21st century America. These and other questions will intrigue us as we complete the course, and our view of our heritage, both its literature and its history, will evolve. If you read and contemplate the implications of our assigned texts, you will be surprised, enlightened, and perhaps transformed by what you will learn. That's a pretty bold promise, but if you engage these materials with a sincere desire to learn, this course will not disappoint. But before we begin our journey, let me make a few introductory remarks about our subject, American literature. What do we mean by American literature? What is literature, and what makes some literature American while other literature is not? Literature can be defined as any text of significant or lasting artistic value. By this definition, a cake recipe or an account ledger would likely not make the cut as literature. But even a political document or speech, such as the Declaration of Independence or Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, would qualify. As a practical matter, American literature is usually confined to texts written or produced in the United States, including its preceding colonies prior to the American Declaration of Independence. But some literary critics, philosophers, and historians have restricted the subject matter even further. For example, the 19th century author and philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote that American literature needed to be uniquely American. In his speeches and writings, he complained that American literature did not really yet exist in his time. Emerson claimed that literature in America had no unique or even distinctive features. He thought that contemporary literature from America could, in fact, be written by anybody in Europe, anywhere in Europe. Emerson was uneasy because he believed that American writers were merely carrying on European traditions. In response, Emerson famously called for the creation of a new type of literature, a distinctly American literature. In his now famous address to the Phi Beta Kappa Society at Harvard, Emerson proclaimed, "Our day of dependence, our long apprenticeship to the learning of other lands, draws to a close. The millions that around us are rushing into life cannot always be fed on the sere remains of foreign harvests." Emerson believed that America needed a break from the past and a new and noble project to remake America in a totally American image. Is the only thing different about American literature the simple fact that it is being scribbled to paper on American soil? No, claimed the Sage of Concord. Still, by his highly restrictive definition, one might argue that Walt Whitman is the first to write text that really qualifies as American literature. In our course, we will examine some of Emerson's arguments. Nevertheless, I do not consider valid Emerson's restrictive argument about what makes literature American. By his definition, the Declaration of Independence would not qualify as American literature because its inspiration came from European authors such as John Locke and Thomas Reed. In fact, the traditional definition of American literature is also too restrictive. Written on American soil? Should we exclude the Mayflower Compact from American lit because it was written aboard ship and agreed to before the Pilgrims landed? Must we exclude Christopher Columbus's journal of his first voyage because it was partly penned during the Atlantic crossing and he missed mainland America? Is Herman Cortez written out of American lit because he sailed from what we know as Cuba and landed in what we now call Mexico? Are John Adams's writings from France or England something other than American literature? What about those foreign-born texts of Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson? When pilgrims, settlers, explorers, or adventurers came to the New World, they knew nothing about our later political divisions, such as the United States, Canada, Mexico, Cuba, the Bahamas. They came to the New World, and their journeys and experiences, their many individual stories, are part of a single story, Europe's discovery, exploration, and settlement of that world. Breaking up these stories in some artificial division based on political events hundreds of years later makes little sense. There is simply no reason to forfeit the story of the French settlement of, say, Quebec in 1608, because that French settlement eventually became part of an English colony, now the independent nation of Canada. Moreover, if we exclude such sources, there is often little likelihood that anyone else, anywhere else, will take up the study of many of these American texts. Consequently, I submit that the best definition of American literature is the broadest definition. While it might be practical to limit the number of pages that students read in a short course, the breadth of the available material should be as broad as the course demands. This means that we should look at the words American literature and concede that America is more than one nation in the Northern Hemisphere. America consists of two continents. There is ample justification to consider all of the texts in the Americas, North America, Central America, and South America, as potential material for study in a course called American Lit. Otherwise, we should follow another naming convention for our course. The distinction between English Lit and British Lit is instructive. English Lit consists of the texts in the English language, while British Lit consists of texts from the British Isles. So those who teach American Lit should acknowledge that all of the literary texts written in the Americas by Americans or about the land, plants, animals, or people of America are legitimately within our course's literary canon, the American literary canon.
This is just going to give you an overview of what you can expect for the year. Let's get started. So the very first literary period that we're going to look at is the colonial period, and we're going to focus specifically into Puritan writing. And this literary period lasts from 1660 to 1776. The characteristics of this writing include the fact that it was instructive. That means that we're going to have a great deal of nonfiction literature, and it's going to seek to reinforce the authority of the church. and also that all people are corrupt and must be saved by God. And therefore, these topics lead to themes that revolve around ethics, responsibility, and survival. This makes sense during this literary period because people are living in dangerous wildernesses, trying to survive and maintain their religious convictions. The Revolutionary War is going to cause the colonial literary period to end. And the Revolutionary War lasts from 1775 to 1783. And it's going to mark the beginning of the Enlightenment period, which lasts from 1776 to 1825. The Enlightenment period was catalyzed by the desire for revolution, and therefore, within this writing, we're going to see topics such as growing patriotism and instilling pride into the new American identity. And the writing is going to seek to create common agreement about issues, specifically political and philosophical issues. It's always also going to seek out creating a national mission and an American character. Therefore, one similarity that this literary period has with the previous colonial literary period is that it's instructive in nature. However, instead of providing instruction based upon religion, this literary era is going to provide instruction on values, specifically what American values are going to be. So while the Enlightenment period was marked by the Revolutionary War, following the Enlightenment period, we have the Romantic period. And this is where writing moves from being more political to more imaginative. So the Romantic literary period lasts from 1825 to 1865, and it reacted against the restraints of the Enlightenment period. So instead of being about politics and policy and philosophy, this literary period, the Romantic literary period, reveled in new freedoms and possibilities. If you think about a brand new country, the boundaries, there are no boundaries. The possibilities are limitless, and therefore people were excited about their futures and what they might find in this brand new country that they've created. Therefore, the writing of this time utilizes themes of spontaneity, imagination, subjectivity, and the purity of nature. We're also going to see a huge increase in fiction writing and poetry writing. And we're also going to see the creation of two subgenres, which is going to include the Gothic subgenre and the Transcendental subgenre. We're probably already familiar with the Gothic subgenre through authors like Edgar Allan Poe, but let's take a closer look at Transcendentalism in case we are unfamiliar with that. So here we have transcendental writing, and that lasts from 1835 to 1860, and remember, it's a part of the Romantic literary movement. So Transcendentalism was an American philosophical and spiritual movement. So it just wasn't a writing style, it's much bigger than that. And it focused on the primacy of the individual conscience and the fact that we can trust the mind of the individual because nature created people and God created nature. And therefore, Transcendentalism rejected materialism in favor of closer communion with nature, which meant a closer communion with the truth and God. Now, Transcendentalism and Romanticism as a writing style ended with the Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865. And the Civil War marked the beginning of the realistic period that lasted from 1865 to 1910. An important thing to know about the realistic period is that it covers a large chunk of historical development in U.S. history. It covers the Civil War, the entire Reconstruction, and the beginning decades of the Jim Crow era. So a great deal happened in U.S. history during the realistic period. Now, realism writing is marked by the following characteristics. It was a reaction to the devastations of the Civil War. The Civil War was fought on U.S. soil. It's called the War Between Brothers, and it resulted in a large death toll that tore apart families and tore apart a country. And because of this, writing turned to much darker and more realistic themes. Realistic writing sought to give accurate, detailed portrayals of ordinary and contemporary life, and it aimed at an honest portrayal of the everyday person. And ultimately, realistic writing rejected the sensationalism, the exaggeration, and the melodrama of the Romantic period. These two literary periods are quite distinctly at odds with each other. You can think of the Romantic literary period as opposite to the realistic literary period. Now, the realistic period ended with the beginning of World War I, which lasted from 1914 to 1918. And World War I marks the beginning of the modern period. The modern period lasts from the 1890s to 1945, but it's important to know that it didn't become widely used until 1917, and even though it's said to have ended with World War II in 1945, it still had characteristics lasting into the 1960s. And these characteristics include the following. It was a reaction to the disillusionment caused by war, specifically World War I, and therefore it radically breaks with the traditional modes of Western art, thought, religion, social conventions, and morality. World War I was a devastating war with high death tolls and widespread destruction, and it caused writers, artists, and people in general to question the norms that they had been taught. Therefore, major themes of this literary period include attacks on the notions of hierarchy. It experiments in new forms of narrative, such as stream of consciousness. It utilizes philosophies such as existentialism. It utilizes alternative viewpoints and modes of thinking, and also it tries new tactics such as being self-referential as a means of drawing attention to the relationships between artist and audience in form and content. This type of writing is known as an avant-garde period, and it led to some very interesting subgenres, which included the Harlem Renaissance and the Lost Generation. So the Harlem Renaissance is going to last from 1918 to 1930, and we'll learn a great deal more about that subgenre later in the year, as well as the subgenre of the Lost Generation, which lasted from 1918 to the 1930s as well. What marked the end of modernism was World War II, which lasted from 1939 to 1945, and following World War II, we will then go into contemporary writing. So that is your overview of the American literature timeline.
Well, that was very explicit, by the way. So, nevertheless, I encourage you to have a quietly reading here, and I want to talk about this feature American literature. So, it can be difficult to generalize the feature American literature, but we can name some ideas over here. American literature was characterized by its self-conscious effort to break away from literary forms established in Great Britain and other European countries. Authors like John Neal were inspired to create their own literary style, emphasizing the realities of American life, including the use of colloquial language. A sense of individualism and celebration of the individual experience is one of the central features of American literature. Also, American literature can be characterized by its many forms of original literature. These include Native American literature, African American literature, Chicano literature, and the literature of various poets. Speaking about the importance here, has played significant role in shaping the culture and identity of the United States, as well influenced development of literature around the world. The novels. We are we going to talk about the novels? Novels, poetry, and short stories of writers such as Edgar Allan Poe, Ernest Hemingway, and Mark Twain have made an enormous contribution to the existence of literature and we know it today. Did you know Edgar Allan Poe is created with the creation of the more the horror genre and detective story? I'm sure you know. Well, of course we know it was important in developing American identity by telling the story of the nation, as you were watching the previous video. So the literature helped the new country establish itself as independent. That's the key, independence, of course, from Great Britain. Also, literature helped to develop the nation by articulating ideas central to national identity. We have here some example American literature, novels. We have some important authors like Fitzgerald, Hemingway, Harper Lee, essays like Benjamin Franklin, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, poets Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, T.S. Eliot, Edgar Allan Poe, dramatists Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller. Now we have some books. There are some important books of American literature: Moby Dick, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, The Great Gatsby, The Sun Also Rises. Here are some takeaways. Some key takeaways. Early American literature was often non-fiction, focused instead on history and describing the process of colonization. During the American Revolution, post-revolutionary, the political state was the dominant literary format. The 19th century saw the formation of styles specific to American literature. The novel rose in prominence and many important poets also became famous. In the middle of this century, the main literary style shifted from romanticism to realism. Many texts from early 20th century American literature explore social commentary, critique, and disunited themes. By the end of the 20th century, American literature had developed into the highly diversified and varied body of work what we see today. So we have here some frequently asked questions about American literature. What is this? It's generally defined as literature from the United States. Characteristics. Some emphasis on individuality, providing a strongly American sense of place, and embrace a diverse array of other styles. How American literature and American identity interrelated. Many are forms. We all know literature is a way for a culture to define and create its identity. So American literature exposes many aspects of American identity, such as an inclination toward independence and individuality. At the same time, it reinforces and constructs these qualities of American identity by solidifying and emphasizing them in literature. An example, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain is a classic example. Importance has generated some of the most important and influential authors worldwide who have shaped literature into what we know today. Also play an important role in development of the United States and American identity. Right. So we all know this is just an overview because I'm sure you have you had this subject and you know about this, but it's important to remember in this subject. So now it's time to talk about American novels genres. American literature, we were talking about a lot of this, has a rich tradition of novels. And this has of course various genre. All of this reflect the diversity of experience and perspective within the United States. So here are some key genres and notable examples of American novels. Starting with historical fiction. Example, Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. Excellent book. This explores specific period in American history, offering fictionalized account of events, people, and culture. Then we go to Southern Gothic, To Kill a Mockingbird. This is an amazing book by Harper Lee. Southern Gothic novels often delve into the cultural complexity of the American South, addressing issues of race, class, and morality. Then we have science fiction, Dune by Frank Herbert. I know all you do know the movie Dune. Then we have Transcendentalism, Walden by Henry Thoreau. Transcendentalism is more philosophical movement. Then we have Realism and Naturalism, The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. This is related to the society. The Beat Generation on the Road by Jack Kerouac, that captured the counterculture spirit of the 50s and 60s, challenging societal norms and exploring personal freedom. Then we have Postmodernism, Panic Jest with David Foster Wallace, Mystery Noir to Maltese Falcon by Tishon Hammett. Noir means black in is in French, and actually um, it's related to mystery, crimes, and detective stories, police novels. So it's related to that. Contemporary literature, correction, Jonathan Franzen. Then we have young adult fiction. Example, The Hunger Games. I'm sure you know the movies. This is by Susan Collins. Regional literature, Your Eyes Were Watching God, Zora Neale Harrison. Some American novels focus on specific regions, provide insight into the unique culture, dialect, and landscape area like American South, Midwest, or Appalachia. Picard's novels, Adventure Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. This is very famous. Picard's novels often follow roguish protagonists and series specific adventures, where we can see humor and satirical commentary on society. Magical Realism, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Then we have this genre, chick lit. Chick lit explain about will be a chick it's for girls and lit is for of course literature. To explain the genre only for girls. Then we have new journalism, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. Apocalyptic and dystopian fiction, The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Autobiographical fiction, The Buljar by Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath is another great author, especially in poems. Satirical novels, Native American literature, multicultural and migrant narratives, The Joy Love. So this genre represents just a fraction of the diverse and dynamic landscape of American novels and showcase the versatility and depth of them, highlighting the ever-evolving nature of literature in the United States. Each genre reflects different aspects of American culture, history, and societal values, providing readers with a wide range of literature experience. And now I want to show you the Great American Novel, a hand-drawn US map plotting the location of 42 classic works of fiction. Well, in short words, the Great American Novels are places from the pages of America's finest literary works. This actually I prepared the Great American Novel series. This is a playlist. As you can see, each one of them has an hour length, almost 2 hours. But everyone is talking about every work. For example, the Great American Novel series Moby Dick, Scarlet Letter, Go Telling to the Mountain, 32 videos. This playlist is now in our virtual classroom. You can find it over there. And almost I forgot, we have another playlist, English literature, analysis of To Kill a Mockingbird. This is another playlist. It's short. Every video is shorter than the previous playlist, but each one is very, very interesting. The Great Gatsby. Right, let's go back here. In short words, the Great American Novel the story came out of the United States that featured the location of 42 wonderful classic works of fiction. So, the Great American Novel, it's a compile of 42 works of fiction, and in this case, it shows the locations of every literature work. For example, let's go over here. This is 10, The Great Gatsby. 10, number 10, 8, here, New York, Long Island, New York, number 10, with Gatsby. Huckleberry Finn, The Adventure of Huckleberry Finn. Let's see, it's number 2. Number 2. Here, Animal Empty. Well, you can find 42 finest literary works. This is amazing, amazing work actually. And now this is a continue of what we were talking about, but in this case, we can analyze linguistic features specific to novel genres. For example, historical fiction, linguistic feature, rich and descriptive language that capture a historical setting. If you want to know what linguistic feature is, remember to go back to our lesson 1, 2, and 3. Or also we have in another subject called American text commentaries. So if you don't remember right now what the linguistic feature is, please read about in previous lessons. Southern Gothic, we have atmospheric and often dark tone, dialect colloquialism specific to the southern regions, science fiction, futuristic and imaginative vocabulary, transcendentalism, philosophical language, realism, objective and detailed observation of everyday life, generations, spontaneous and free-flowing prose, postmodernism, metafictional elements breaking through the fourth wall, playful and experimental use of language and structure, mystery or noir, hard-boiled interest dialogue, use of colloquial language in detective narrative, regional literature, regional dialects, magical realism, blending of the fantastical and the everyday, chick conversational and relatable tone, new journalism, first person narrative style, apocalyptic and dystopian fiction, bleak and foreign tone, autobiographical fiction, intimate and reflective tone, satirical novel, sarcasm and irony, Native American literature, incorporation of indigenous language and cultural references, multicultural and immigrant narrative, code switching, especially code switching, to represent different cultural and linguistic influences. So we can see here some example. Historical fiction, The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. Its linguistic feature is rich in descriptive language capturing the historical setting of Nazi Germany. For example, in Sorry Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil by John Burnett, the atmospheric and mysterious tone. In science fiction, Neuromancer by William Gibson, linguistic feature, futuristic and cyberpunk vocabulary. Transcendentalism, Moby Dick. The linguistic feature here is the elevated and philosophical language, symbolism, metaphor, realism and materialism. We have the Sister Carrie by Theodore Dreiser, objective detailed observation or urban life, realistic dialogue, On the Road by Jack Ra, spontaneous free-flowing prose, Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, metafictional elements, mystery noir. We have here The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler, hard-boiled and tears dialogue atmosphere setting created through descriptive language. Bastard Out of Carolina and Regional Literature by Dorothy Allison. We have here exploration of family dynamics in the region, magical realism. Well, as you can see, we have here in every genre of novel, we have examples, and we have the linguistic features of every example. So these examples showcase the linguistic diversity within different numerical novel genres, highlighting how authors use language. How authors use language to enhance the thematic and stylistic aspect of their storytelling. Right. Kind of long, lesson 4, isn't it? Well, to end this lesson, so we have some question in forum 4. Well, we have here question about American literature and question about American novel genres. You can answer in pairs. And don't forget to watch the American Literature playlist and the Great American Novel Series playlist. They are very interesting. I know it's kind of long, but I'm sure you will like it. Well, see you next time then.